Hello and welcome to the Iron John podcast. In this episode, Robert Bringhurst narrates, translates, and discusses a Navajo story that was transcribed in the Navajo language by Edward Sapir from a telling by story carrier Chala-tzo in 1929. Robert discusses oral cultures and the dangers oral literatures face when they encounter a literate, grasping, and somewhat deranged culture such as ours. The tale focuses on the travels of changing woman's son to the Six Mountains to bring into the world some of that which the people would need. Now, here's Robert Bringhurst.
What's going to happen is you're going to hear a story from me, but I'm not going to tell it. I'll explain how that can be, how it has to be. Stories are among the original trade goods, right up there with abalone shell and obsidian and other things that humans have always needed. Obsidian is pretty hard, but even so it changes as it passes from hand to hand because we use it to do things, and so it gets worn and chipped. Stories are softer and they change even more readily as they pass from hand to hand, and that's fine if that's what you want, but it's not always fine. People use stories in different ways, and they when they pass from one, not just from one person to another, but from one culture to another, they do go through very serious transformations, real metamorphoses. And metamorphosis is a dangerous business, as every frog knows. You may get bigger and stronger and more complex, or you may get shrunk somehow and lose important parts. What happens if you live in an arrogant, narcissistic, violent, confused culture that has displaced a lot of other smaller local cultures and tried to erase their social structures and their relationships with the land, their ways of life, and then likes to turn them into romantic symbols and icons for things like football teams, service stations, oil company service stations. Well, what would you expect to happen if a story was traded from one of those little local cultures into this big, ravenous, narcissistic culture? You think the story would prosper? I don't think so. So there has to be a solution to this problem, and there is one. You might think that oral stories are fluid and written stories are fixed, and that's not entirely wrong, but it's a great oversimplification of the truth. Oral literature is like jazz. That is, it isn't written down and every performance is different, but it isn't just invented out of thin air either. Jazz musicians practice, they rehearse, they challenge themselves, they learn to do things that other people can't do, and then they do them, and they do them again, and they do them again, and they do them better, and they do them differently. But there's a great deal of preparation involved in that spontaneity. Oral literature is like that. North of central Mexico, there were no indigenous writing systems in the Americas, but that doesn't mean there was no literature. All literatures are oral if you go back far enough. Greek, French, Spanish, English, Irish, German, Finnish, Russian, Norse, all these literatures were oral before they ever got written down. And we have old monuments of oral literature, the Odyssey and the Iliad and the Nibelungen Lied and the Beowulf and the Ramayana and the poem of the Cid, because as people learned to write, they didn't forget how to listen. And so they worked with oral poets, myth tellers, and took dictation. In North America, between around 1870 and 1940, when there were still old people living on this continent who had grown up in an entirely oral world, not untouched by Western civ, but not destroyed by it either. A few determined people who could write devoted themselves to taking dictation. And so there are literary records, stories, narrative, poems in about 100 Native American languages, North American languages. These languages didn't have writing systems of their own, so the people taking dictation had to write in phonetic script, and they had to write fast, which means they had to be, trained. They had to learn to do this work, and some of them did. Because of the strange way I was raised, I grew up knowing a few words of Navajo and a few words of Cree, but not very much. And I didn't think about this much for a while, but about 50 years ago, I got to thinking that, I had to start taking this business seriously. And so I started to study Native American languages in a serious way. In order to do what I wanted to do, I would have needed to learn about 100 languages, which is too much for me. But I tried to get close to a few, and I studied them in the way that you would study ancient Greek or classical Sanskrit. That is, using these documents that were produced by linguists and by native speakers who had learned to write almost entirely from a period before I was born. There are thousands and thousands of pages of this stuff, and we as a culture have made a practice of ignoring it. But the work I've been doing for the last several decades would be utterly impossible without the labors of these linguists who did their work before I was born, and without the generosity of hundreds of native speakers who took the time and took the risk of sharing what they knew with people who were there to write it down. One of these people was a man named Chala-tzo. If you're a Navajo speaker, you'll recognize that Chala-tzo is a funny name. It's funny because it's half English and half Navajo. Chala is Navajo for Charlie or Charles. Tzo is Navajo for big. So Big Charlie, or Charlemagne, if you like, was a man who had chosen to go by this culture-straddling name. He had other names, of course, that were purely Navajo, and he chose not to tell those names to outsiders. One thing that he would like you to know about him is that he was which means he belonged to the River Junction clan, the clan of the waters coming together. He was born around 1853, and he died in 1932. So probably he comes from even before the time of this ancient canoe that's hanging up above here. (1853) is not all that long ago, but the world was very different then from what it is now. When Chala-tzo was born, his people were still living in their own country on their own terms. When he was a boy, every Navajo that the U.S. Army could get its hands on was herded into Fort Sumner and kept there for several years. And when Chala-tzo was a teenager, they were let out and marched back to where they'd come from. People died on these marches, going in and coming back out, but this period of oppression cemented the Navajo nation in a way that few others have experienced, and that has something to do with the fact that there are more Navajo speakers alive now than there have ever been before. The Navajo are a success story. They have their own police force, their own Bureau of Weights and Measures, their own university, their own all sorts of things that most tribal peoples have to do without. And they have a lot of land, which other people still want. So things are not easy for them, but they survived. Chala-tzo's contemporaries would include, for example, Augusta Gregory, the great scholar of Irish literature who taught William Butler Yeats all the things he needed to know about Irish tradition. And they would include the French poet Arthur Rimbaud and novelists like Robert Louis Stevenson and Joseph Conrad. He belongs to this generation of people. Of course, he never heard of any of those folks. He might have liked to meet Augusta Gregory. I don't know about Rimbaud, but that's his place in the calendar. And in the summer of 1929, at Chala, Arizona, he dictated some stories to a linguist named Edward Sapir, really one of the great linguists. If anybody could learn 100 languages in their lifetime, Sapir would be the man. He had a real gift for this work. And Edward Sapir wrote down this story as Chala-tzo told it. And in this story, you will get a little tour of the Navajo universe, the 6 mountains that map out the place, the mountain of the center, the mountain of the east, and the south, and the west, and the north, and the mountain that's just a little bit east of center. So this is a perfect 4-cornered world, but it's not symmetrical. And if you listen closely to the story, you'll hear that it goes around the circle more than once. So you make sure that the story wants you to know where you are. It wants to take you around. It wants you to learn the map of the land. Jo, azat nabli biajil haila donis niada. Dort liji ashki jili go hatida holech biniye. Changing woman's son, then. Where didn't that one go, the turquoise boy, so things would come to be? How are the things they need in order to live here ever going to be here? He put this question to his mother, changing woman. I don't know. I can't tell you that, my son, she said, they say. They say his mother said, why don't you go and see? Even though she must have known, she told him only this, they say. His mother, who had in mind a gift from him. I should have said this before anyway. I'm telling you this story as nearly as I can in Chala-tzo's own words. I mean, they're English words now, but I'm not leaving anything out and I'm not putting anything in. I'm not changing the story to make it easy for you to understand. In other words, I'm making it difficult for you to understand. There's a reason for that. Glad to hear it. In many Native American languages, the speaker is obliged to make clear whether he is speaking from his own personal experience or telling about something that he knows at second hand or has some other distant relationship with. For example, I could not say in Navajo, my mother was born in 1917, because I wasn't there, and I can't possibly have experience of when my mother was born. So I have to say my mother was born in 1917, Genie. So I have heard. I can tell you what I did in 1967, but not what happened, not what my mother did in 1917. So the story obeys this kind of grammar. And the way you say he said in Navajo is Genie. And the way you say they say in Navajo is Genie. And so a lot of sentences in this story in Navajo end Genie, Genie. He said, they say. Also, the number 4 is very important in the Navajo universe, and things aren't real unless they've happened 4 times. And people take pleasure in these kinds of repetitions in the same way that, if you're playing Mozart, you repeat things because that's part of the way the music works. It wants to, if it tells you something really beautiful, it wants you to hear it again. Make sure you heard it well. Stories are like that. So people enjoy taking the time to hear these repetitions. And one of the things that's wrong with the versions of Native American stories that keep appearing in English is that people leave these repetitions out. They leave a lot of other things out too. But if you're not interested enough in the story to hear it on its terms, you're not interested enough. Okay. So that's the way it's going to go. Even though she must have known, she told him only this, they say. His mother, who had in mind a gift from him, just said to him, they say, just that. Wanting, say, a basket full of white shell, she said, just that, they say. Why don't you go and see? You could go, my son, to the holy places for this, she said to him, they say. You could go up to the summit of the mountain of the east. 12 forms of talking God live there. That's a place where things are known. You are able to go there. Maybe what you're looking for is known there, his mother said to him, they say. And then he headed there, they say. He arrived there, they say. It was the way she said it was, they say. 12 talking gods were living there, they say. Beside the doorway, fat corn grew, they say. He went inside, they say. Are you after something, grandson? The talking god asked, they say. Yes, grandfather. I've come here to make things, grandfather, he said, they say. I've come here, grandfather, so that what they need to be here will be here, he said to him, they say. Yes, well, look around. What is it you're after? Here, you see, are all the soft goods. Here is white shell, he said, they say. And here is turquoise, he said, they say. And here are deer hides, he said, they say. And here are cougar hides, too, he said, they say. And here are the designs for all the things that are designed, he said, they say. That is not what I am after, grandfather. So this is what I'm after. See, the wind knows what I'm after, he said, they say. What I'm after is to bring a means of travel into being, he said, they say. That is not here, grandson, he said, they say. If you had said, I'm after hard goods, they are right here, he said to him, they say. If you had said, I'm after white shell and turquoise, those are here, he said to him, they say. But grandson, what you're looking for is not here, he said to him, they say. The rainbow is our only means of travel, he said to him, they say. The sun's rays are our only means of travel. That is how we get around, he said to him, they say. He said, go up to the mountain of the south, they say. That's a place where things are known. 12 of the calling gods live there, he said. It might be found there, he said to him, they say. He came to that place, they say. It was just the same. Again, they say, fat corn stood beside the door, they say, 12 stalks in 2 rows. He went inside. Are you looking for something, grandson? I've come for what they need in order to be here, grandfathers, he answered them. You see what there is here, grandson. What is it you're after, he was asked. Here is turquoise. Here is white shell. Here are all the kinds of soft goods and all the kinds of hard goods. That is not what I am after, grandfather. What I'm after is to bring a means of travel into being, he said to him, they say. The thing you're after is not here, grandson, he said to him, they say. If you'd said, I'm after soft goods, those are here, grandson. If you'd said, I'm after hard goods, those are here, grandson. But what you're after is not here, grandson. The sun's rays are our only means of travel. The rainbow is our only means of travel. Go up to the mountain of the west, grandson. 12 of the talking gods live there. What you're after might be found there. So he went there too. It was the same in every way, they say. Beside the doorway, fat corn grew, they say. Are you after something, grandson? He was asked. I've come for what they need in order to be here, grandfather, he said, they say. Well, if you'd said, I'm after soft goods, they are here. If you'd said, I'm after hard goods, they are here, he was told. If you'd said, I'm after art forms, they are here, he was told. The rainbow is our only means of travel, he was told. The sun's rays are our only means of travel, he was told. What you say you're after isn't here, he was told. Could it be over there at the summit of the mountain of the north? 12 calling gods are living in that place. That's a place where things are known. And he arrived there. It was just the same, they say. 12 of them were living there as well, they say, calling gods just outside the same way. 12 stocks standing there in pairs, they say. And they were decorated heavily, they say. They were draped, they say, with turquoise. They were draped, they say, with white shell. They were draped with deer hides. They were draped, they say, with cougar skins, too. They were draped, they say, with river otter skins. Every one was draped with soft goods. Every one was draped with hard goods. What you see is what we have. Perhaps some of that is what you're after, grandson, he was told, they say. But what you say you're after isn't here. This is all we have, they told him. If you'd said, I'm after soft goods, those are here. If you'd said, I'm after hard goods, those are here. None of that is what I'm after, grandfather. What you say you're after, grandson, is your mother's. White shell woman, changing woman, has it, grandson? Surely, he was told, they say. What you say you're after is the sun's, your father's, he was told. Why are you out looking? The sun, your father, has it, he was told. Go back and see your mother, white shell woman, he was told. And then he headed back. He reached his mother's place at the summit of the mountain of the center. He reached his mother's place. Mother, he said, you're unbelievable. It's yours. You have it, they say, he said, they say. Of course, my son. And after all that, have you brought me a basket of white shells? She said to him, they said. One of the wind's children spoke then from inside his ear, they say. It said, tell her you have it. The old guys, they didn't have pieces of paper that got stuck together.
They say.
He said.
After all that, my son, have you brought me a basket of turquoise? She said to him, his mother did, they say. After all that, have you brought me a basket of abalone shell? After all that, have you brought me a basket of jetstone? She said to him, his mother did. They say, tell her you have them, the wind's child said to him, they say, from there inside his ear. I have them, he said, they say. She inspected all four. So you have, my son, and I accept them, she said to him, they say. She spoke, they say, as if a debt were being paid. Now that it's so, my son, you must go to your father, she said to him, they say. That's the way she spoke of the source of the sunlight, they say. And then he set off, they say. As he was on his way, whiteness blanketed the ground around him, they say, and when he looked up, a line of horses stood there, they say. The sun on a turquoise horse stood first, they say. Next was the moon on a white shell horse, they say. Mirage people were next on mirage horses, they say. And mist people were next on horses of mist, they say. There were 12 altogether, they say. Where are you going, my son? He said, they say. I'm headed over that way, he answered him, they say. We're headed to your mother's place, he said, they say, the son did. We're on our way to White Shell's woman place. We're on our way to Changing Woman's place. That's where we are headed. This is where you turn around. They vanished in a wink, they say. And then he turned around, they say, and went back to his mother. There is one more thing, my son, she said to him, they say. Go to Wide Mountain, she said to him, they say. Wide Mountain is the one just east of the center, the one that doesn't fit into the pattern. So he headed out again, they say. At Wide Mountain, a ladder poked up out of unworked earth, they say. When he got there, someone was sitting there already down below, they say. A man very old and very big around was sitting there, they say. A woman very big around was sitting there also, they say. A young man was also sitting there, they say. A young woman, just like the others, was sitting there, they say. An old man, they say. His wife, they say. His son, they say. His daughter, they say. And the girl, they say, saw him up above. Father, someone is standing up there, she said, they say. An earth surface person is up there, she said, they say. Who could be moving around as you say, he said, they say. But there he is. They spoke this way 4 times, they say. And then the old man rose, they say, Mirage Man himself, they say. He looked at him, they say, up there. Come in, grandson, he said, they say. The ladder had 12 rungs going down into the ground, they say. He went down it, they say. What is it you're after, grandson? The old man said to him, they say. You must be the traveler we've heard of, he said to him, they say. It's me all right, grandfather, he said to him, they say. I've come for what they need in order to be here, grandfather, he said to him. They say, the reason I'm here, grandfather, is to bring a means of travel into being, he said to him. They say. Yes, grandson, this is where it is, he said to him. They say. You'll see it now, he said to him. They say. He went with the old man. This is what they are going to need in order to be here, the old man said to him, they say. He opened a door toward the east, they say. The space reached out as far as one could see, they say. Next to the entrance, Whiteshell pranced, they say. Whiteshell had taken the form of a horse. Even its rope, they say, was Whiteshell. Gracefully, ceaselessly lifting its feet, it was prancing, they say. Behind it, many kinds of Whiteshell horses ranged, they say. Fine rain kept falling on them everywhere, they say. Little turquoise birds fluttered just above their heads, they say. He opened a door to the south, they say. There were many horses of turquoise, they say. It was the same, they say, a turquoise horse prancing, they say, near the door. The bridle rope was turquoise, they say. There were more in the image of this one, they say. Rainbows touched the ground among them, they say, and fine rain was forming, they say. Purple martins fluttered over them, they say. So he had opened doors in 2 directions, they say. And he opened a door toward the west, they say. Abalone shell repeated itself in the form of a horse, they say. Horses of abalone shell, and there were many there, they say. Again it was the same. Rain like fine mist fell upon them. Yellow warblers fluttered just above them. He opened a door toward the north, they say. There was an Appaloosa bridled with sunbeams. Many Appaloosas stretched away, their lashes like snow. These were his favorite, they say. What the old man liked most of all, they say, were horses with white lashes. All kinds of little birds fluttered above them. Sunbeams touched the ground among them, out as far as one could see, they say. So he had opened doors in 4 directions. How much of this, which is as you see, can you earth surface people keep holy, my grandson? He said to him, they say. He guided him back to where the white shell horse was tethered near the doorway. For you earth surface people who keep nothing holy, I'll brush something off of it, he said to him, they say. And so it was. He brushed something off and cut it for him, they say. He went with him to the south, where the turquoise horse was standing. He brushed something off and cut it. He went with him to the west, where the abalone horse stood. He brushed something off and cut it again. In the north, then, where the horse in the form of an Appaloosa was standing, he brushed something off and cut it. He went with him again to the one who stood in the east. He passed a bead of white shell through its mouth for him. Then the one in the south, and passed a bead of turquoise through its mouth for him. And then to the one in the west, and passed a bead of abalone shell through its mouth. And then with him again to the one who stood in the north, and passed a bead of jet stone through its mouth for him. He bundled up everything he'd gathered. He put with it what he had passed through the horses' mouths, and he tied it together. That's it, grandson, he said, they say. Now you go back to your mother, he said to him, they say. And then he started back. He returned to his mother. He told her where he'd been. What you were after you have, my son, she said to him, they say. Nevertheless, his mother questioned him further. Do you have one of those that has no arrow wound, my son? She was speaking of a deer hide, one that's been killed without being punctured. It's what is called one with no arrow wound. From deep inside his ear, a child of the wind said, Tell her you have it, they say. Yes, mother. It's well that you have it, my son, she told him, they say. Then, for this reason, they say, the word went around. The holy people gathered there, they say. It was time for what had been brushed from the horses, they say. Those who had come to him from elsewhere were there. The sun, the moon, the mirage people, mist people, sun people, moon people, all the holy people filled the house for this reason, they say. And one with no arrow wound was unfolded. What was brushed from the horses was set on its surface, they say. The white shell bead was placed with it, they say. Beads were set in 4 places, they say. The turquoise bead was set with it, they say. The abalone bead was set with it, they say. The jetstone bead was set with it also, they say. All kinds of hard goods were placed with it, they say, and 12 of those with no arrow wound were spread on top of it, they say. And the people settled down around it, they say. And the singing started, they say. First, the singing of house songs, they say. And after the singing of house songs, the singing of horse songs, they say. When they were halfway through the singing, what was set there grew this high, they say. What had been brushed from the horses was moving, they say. It was just before dawn, they say. The singing continued without interruption, they say. And dawn broke, they say. And they fell asleep, they say. Some of the gods started sleeping, they say. From over the entrance, they say, came the neighing of horses. From the other side, too, came the neighing of horses, they say. Something's happened, wake up. The sleepers were roused. People have heard something here. The gods had been sleeping, they say. There were questions, they say. What could be heard, they asked one another, they say. The neighing of horses came from the opposite side. Again there was neighing, they say. 4 times it happened, they say. There were more and more horses, they say. What was placed with the hard goods grew larger and larger, they say. In that place there were more and more horses, they say. When the songs of each one had stretched at full length, dawn filled the sky, they say, and the horses kicked free of their covers, they say. They started to stand, they say. As the singing ended, they stood there, they say. The turquoise horse and the white shell horse called to each other, they say. The abalone horse and the jetstone horse called to each other, they say. Since this happened, horses exist, and so do their name. Wide Mountain, it's called, Cisnatil, it's called, where this happened. The old men's stories began at that place. They and their knowledge have vanished, the stories that tell what exists and what's needed to live, and those who told them have vanished. This one was told to me, though, by the one we called Wide Man, after I'd paid him. So old Charlie says that they've all vanished, that the old men have vanished and the stories have vanished. But old Charlie, Big Charlie, was one of the old men. And he told this story 2 years before he died to someone who was able to write it down. And in fact, in the last years of Big Charlie's life, there were at least a dozen other expert Navajo myth tellers doing the same thing, talking to people with pencils and pieces of paper. Pliny Goddard, Berard Hale, Gladys Reichhardt, and Edward Sapir all took thousands of pages of dictation in Navajo. So there's a whole library of Navajo stories. And there are still people telling these stories. Of course, they change. Stories are alive, and so they change. They have to change. But just as we can go back and read Homer and Plato and Aristotle and Jane Austen and Henry Melville, Herman Melville, Henry Thoreau. We can go back and read these old men and women. Told these stories told by people who really knew their way around.